100 years ago, they were where you wanted to be on Missouri Route 66. Now you can barely find what's left of attractions that were so popular, they needed assistance from the police to keep traffic moving.
Today we explore the abandoned and forgotten as we go beyond the exit.
Our first forgotten location today is Arlington, Missouri, located on what is called Arlington Road, between Rolla, Missouri and the small town of Devil's Elbow. We will also be taking a look at the little town of Newberg, which had two popular attractions, Vernal's Motel and the infamous John's Modern Cabins. The exit to get to Stony Dell Resort is exit 172 to Jerome and Dixon, while the dead-end section that contains the other two businesses and the remains of Arlington are at exit 176, both on I-44. Built on the confluence of the Gasconade River and the Little Piney Creek, all three of these businesses are shuttered today, two of them in private hands, and one slowly disintegrating just off the side of the Mother Road. Today we're going to take a look at their stories. Arlington was originally called Little Piney after the creek adjacent to the town. Originally settled by Thomas and James Harrison, it was later established as a township by General Fremont in 1867. However, the town was rebranded later, Arlington, after the Robert E. Lee plantation. At least that's the official story. If you ask the locals, they'll tell you that it was named after a lady named Arlie, the wife of a local merchant. Arlington and the little town of Jerome, located across the Gasconade River, began serving fishermen as well. About this time, the Pacific Railroad decided to run tracks through the area and built a small station. With the new rail service and the fishermen still coming in by droves, the town was growing rapidly, and just when you thought it couldn't get any better, they hit their big break. Enter the newly formed route system, a set of highways sprawling across the U.S., bringing travelers right to their doorstep on little old Route 66. The new highway began bringing new travelers into the area, and once they found the serene setting and the fishing was so good, several fishing resorts began to pop up on both sides of the river. Enter George Pruitt, with an amazing idea and a way to sell it. You see, Mr. Pruitt formed what was known as the famous Stony Dell Resort, and it was quite a sight to see. True to its name, beautiful and intricate stonework was found everywhere, including this stone arch pictured here. However, the best was yet to come. You see, on site was an amazing high-capacity artesian well, which by the way is still active in 2023. Mr. Pruitt decided that he would make the most of that well. By 1932, there were tons of travelers from Chicago to LA and all places in between, utilizing Route 66. So what kind of genius landmark would draw all these people in and keep them there? Pictured before us here is the answer: a 100-foot-long stone and mortar swimming pool, fed by a fountain from that beautiful well. Folks that took a dip in the pool were always remarking on how cold the spring was coming into it, and how rejuvenating the waters were. Word of mouth spread fast, and in less than a year, it was the hot spot to be. To put it in perspective, during the busy summer months, the pool and picnic area alone would stop traffic on Route 66, causing the police to come in and unsnarl the mess. In addition to its famous stream-fed pool, a restaurant, service station, and bus stop offering tennis, dancing, boating, and fishing. And that famous artesian well with the wonderful rejuvenating waters, you could take some of it home in a bottle from the gift shop. Even the famous movie star Mae West paid a few visits to Stony Dell, a fact that became a local point of pride for years. Stony Dell even made Jack Rittenhouse's 1946 guidebook to Highway 66. He notes that the resort has several stone buildings, a swimming pool, a store, several cabins, and a justice of the peace. That's right, you could also be married and honeymoon right at Stony Dell. Now before we go on, I want to bring in the other portion of our story, John's Modern Cabins and Vernal's Motel, Restaurant, and Gas Station, in strict competition, separated by only a quarter mile on the route, in the little town of Newberg, Missouri. In 1931, Beatrice and Bill Bayless opened Bill and Bess's place, with a dance hall and 6 log cabins, shown here on Route 66. Well, it didn't take long for Bill and Bess's dance hall to gain a little bit of a reputation for being the wildest place in the county. Lots of crazy stories were told about Bill and Bess's, but probably the most infamous was the story of an estranged wife shot by her jealous husband. Bill and Bess sold their place shortly after this tragedy, and even though it was never credited with it, the murder brought a shadow over the place that was never resolved. The next few years saw the motor court change hands several times. In stark contrast, next door, what would later become Vernell's Motel first opened in the early 1930s as E.P. Gassers, which included a novelty shop, a gas station, and 6 cabins. With nearby Fort Leonard Wood beginning to aid with the buildup in preparation for World War II, a housing shortage in the area forced many people to take up permanent residences in cabins like these. Little did anyone know what the effect of World War II would be. Hello, fellow travelers. I just wanted to take the time to say we would love to have you as a part of our caravan. It's really very simple to hop on board. Just like and subscribe our channel. We would be very grateful to have you along with us. Now, back to our video. As the U.S. celebrated victory with its allies and our soldiers returned home from war, they discovered that the little towns of Arlington, Missouri and Newberg, Missouri had been forgotten. While people still lived in the communities, they had never been very large and depended greatly on tourism from the railroad and Route 66. Bill and Bess's was closed and had been abandoned for a few years. E.P. Gassers was open for business, but just barely. Meanwhile, down the road at Arlington, Missouri, Stony Dell Resort languished. After many hard, quiet years during the war, cabins were in disarray, and its claim to fame, that famous artesian well stonework pool, was now turning to rubble. However, what came next would actually be the death blow for Stony Dell Resort. You see, the military had a big problem with Route 66 through this area. Not that it was too busy with traffic, but that it was too twisty and narrow to get big equipment up and down to the newly formed Fort Leonard Wood. Not to mention the fact that the Devil's Elbow Bridge, a tight point on the Big Piney River, made the road nearly impassable for military traffic. The answer to this, which we will talk about in another video, was a 4-lane realignment, which almost bypassed Arlington and Jerome. The struggling resort that was so popular began to fade into the dust, a stone's throw from Route 66. Meanwhile, to the east back in Newberg, the little abandoned cabin area, known for its wild and raucous persona, got a new lease on life, being acquired last by John and Lillian Dausch in 1951 for only $5,000. John Dausch would soon acquire the nickname Sunday John, simply because he sold booze 7 days a week in stark defiance of local regulations. Meanwhile, next door, the property changed hands. In 1952, E.P. Gasser sold his gas station, novelty store, and cabins to his nephew Fred and his wife Vernell. 2 major changes came in the form of a brand new restaurant and a modern-style motel named Vernell's. The 1952 realignment of Route 66 that was slowly shuttering Stony Dell Resort did not affect John's and Vernell's in the same way, as they both pretty much thrived during this time period. This was about to change again. In the mid-1960s, the proliferation of the interstate system intruded on this area with the construction of Interstate 44. It was the age-old story of a small town being bypassed by the interstate. By the time it was completed, both businesses in Newberg would suffer greatly, and the majority of the Stony Dell Resort would be demolished as a new bridge was built over both communities across the Gasconade, a bridge so high you can't see either community. While Jerome ended up being serviced by a ramp off of I-44, Arlington did not have that luxury and found itself without a way across the river 3.5 miles away from the interstate on its newly formed dead end. Back at John's modern cabins, tragedy struck with the death of John's wife Lillian. John made the decision to shut down his business. A year later, in 1971, John passed away himself, leaving the property to languish for years. Not long after, Vernell's next door sold as well, transitioning to new owner Ed Goodrich and his faithful dog, Chocolate. Ed decided he would find his niche in getting away from the modern lifestyle, luring his guests in by saying they could enjoy a warm bed, a hot shower, and good old-fashioned fresh air. Fast forward to today, and all three of these locations are now abandoned. Vernell's is still the easiest to spot with all its buildings and signage intact, but the motel and restaurant have long been closed. A little ways up the road, you will find what remains, and that's not much, of John's modern cabins. Still visible from the road's edge, there is a posted notice of poison ivy and dangerous surroundings, as most of the cabins have fallen over. Even the famous neon sign is now gone. The biggest irony of this location was the fact that one of the outhouses still remains a stalwart survivor. It's hilarious to think you could call it modern without indoor plumbing. And whatever happened to that famous resort destination in Arlington? Today, very little of it remains. A few buildings. And what remains of the 100-foot pool now lies under the Interstate. In fact, Arlington had gotten so bad even in the late 50s that a local town person in Rolla bought it for $10,000. with plans of opening a new resort, which never came to fruition. The remaining buildings here are now private residences and should be respected as such. The only traffic crossing the Gasconade between Jerome and Arlington now is that of the railroad.